Good afternoon.
Hi.
How are you, Pete?
I'm very well, Evie. How are you?
I'm good. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us again. You join us on it's a bit up and down, isn't it, the weather?
It's a bit drizzly.
1 minute it's
Showers.
Really sunny and then it showers. It's a bit, it's like all seasons in one day.
It is all
which
seasons
is
in
classic British weather here.
The sound you can hear is a little dog walking around. It's a bear. What sort of dog's bear?
Bear's a Maltese Yorkshire Terrier cross.
Well, he's lovely. He has been barking, so there's a very good chance he's going to bark.
He is very lovely, but he's also particularly attention-seeking. So we apologise in advance if you hear a little
tiptoeing around,
some vocals in the background. He likes to let me know if there's a bird at the window, so that'll be fun.
So
this is actually our second attempt, isn't it, Pete?
it is, yeah. What happened last week? I wasn't ready. Oh, you hadn't read the book?
Yes.
Yes.
So we made a pact at the start of this that we would always, obviously, read the book in full or listen on an audiobook. And I had 2 chapters left last week. So we met up but we used that time wisely instead, didn't we?
Yes,
we did a bit of planning.
We did loads of planning, so we're very planned. We're very well planned this week.
Yes, we're much more prepared. And I have finished the book.
Oh, well done.
Yay.
Well done. But you struggled, didn't you?
I did a little bit, yeah. I think...
Tell me why.
I don't know. Maybe my frame of mind with it and just getting myself into it. It took me a while, but I did in the end. And I really enjoyed it.
Did you listen to her podcast?
I really enjoyed. I mean, I listened to the podcast first. So, and that is what drew me in the first place. So I really enjoyed the podcast. You talk about, so the podcast we're talking about actually is the Brené Brown interview.
The original one, yeah.
The original.
So, which kind of sort of leads into how I came across her in the first place. So I thought my friend Lisa mentioned her to me, Priya Parker, and this book, The Art of Gathering. What's the full name of the book? The Art of Gathering.
How We Meet and Why It Matters.
That's right. And I just thought, I mean, Lisa's very wise, but I just thought it was a book on party planning. Honestly, I did, or organising an amazing conference. And then someone else mentioned it to me, and he trains Google, and doesn't really do events. And I thought there might be something in it. And then Brené Brown, she was on Brené Brown, and frankly, if she's on Brené Brown's podcast, then
we're a big Brené fan.
She's brilliant. Yeah. So that kind of made me read the book, and then it all ties in nicely with how, with us doing this. And you discovered it because I discovered it, because you wouldn't have read it otherwise. No,
I wouldn't have. That is how I discover most of my books nowadays.
And mine.
Yeah. Pete will send me a podcast on something, and then I'll get into the series and then start pulling off all of the books that they're talking through. That's how I'm discovering most of the books I read at the moment.
And then Priya's podcast, Together Apart, which she launched at the beginning of the pandemic. Originally, it was going to be called The Gathering, which she said sounds like a horror film. Her producer said, we can't do this anymore. It's called The Gathering. It's just not right.
I mean, now that you've said it, yes. It's like The Purge, isn't it?
Yeah. They do it really quickly. They turn it around, and they created this podcast called Together Apart. I think there's about 9 episodes. I mean, they're amazing. It's so powerful. And most of them made me cry. I mean, it's just so powerful.
Me too.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why they made us cry is exactly what she talks about in the book. So the overall premise of it is creating gatherings that have a purpose. And so every example that she talks through on her podcast is exactly that. They are meaningful, they're purposeful, they've got a core reason within them, and it's beautiful. And she's obviously going to pick the best ones as well.
Yeah, of course. But it's just incredible. It's just so incredible. So should we talk about who she is, who Priya Parker is?
Yeah, tell me.
So she's a master facilitator trained in the field of conflict resolution.
Which I find amazing.
Yeah, so she worked in India, and she's worked in South Africa, and she's worked in the Middle East. And she spent 15 years helping leaders and communities have complicated conversations about identity and vision at the moments of transition. She's a TED speaker on purpose, which is amazing. And she's executive producer and host of the New York Times podcast, Together Apart, and the author of The Art of Gathering. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. And so she actually says that the reason, I think this is in the podcast rather than the book. So the reason she got into conflict resolution is actually because when she was growing up, she had parents that were completely different from each other, from completely different worlds, that got together, had her, but then decided that they didn't want to be together anymore. So she had to mediate between two parents.
Half Indian,
half
American, white American, evangelical Christian.
Yes.
Half, are they Buddhist? I think Buddhist, or New Agey. but definitely not evangelical Christian on one side, on the mother's side of the family. And then she flipped. She used to spend 2 weeks with each set of parents. And she says there's no wonder that she ended up being a conflict resolution specialist.
Yes. I mean, exactly. No wonder at all. So this book is Peter's choice. Obviously, Invisible Women was my choice.
It is.
The first one. Pete, why did you choose this book?
Because I don't think anyone else talks about the psychology of events.
Yeah.
I think it's like it's a part journey, part guidebook masterclass. It's a workbook on the psychology of events, and it's so incredibly powerful. The examples I've actually printed out loads of examples which I'm not allowed to talk through because we'll just be here all day. But there are so many incredible examples, both on her podcast Together Apart. They're basically case studies. So you should definitely listen to them. There's one that I was going to talk through, but you need to listen to them all because they're so incredibly powerful. And then a book is just a series of different case studies and examples, really good examples.
Incredible, from all over the world. And there are some obviously based in the UK, and there are some that resonate with you and others that potentially don't. But it's really the way that she writes it. She gives context to everything she's saying, and it makes so much sense. And actually, what I found reading through it was that it was like, well, of course. So when she talks about being a chill host and not being too chilled, and the pitfalls of being a chilled host, which everyone feels like they don't want to tell people what to do, you're like, well, obviously.
Yeah.
Like everything that she says, once she's said it and once she's explained it, it just makes you understand the things that have been in your mind, or say you've been at an event and you've been like, oh, that didn't work, or that felt weird, or you come out of it and you feel a little bit deflated and you're like, why? And then she goes through all of these different examples, and it just makes you understand what it means.
The chill hosting. Let's just explain the chill hosting.
Yes.
Because you won't know that unless you read the book. So what is a chill host?
So a chill host is, for instance, someone that invites you round. So they have a party at their house, and they don't want to tell people what to do. So they just let them arrive as and when they want to. It's say they've got nibbles on the go, and they just let people interact with each other, but they don't give a structure to the evening, and they don't give direction throughout the evening.
So she talks about being a generous host with generous authority.
Yes.
And she also talks about, I love this, it's a perfect analogy. She talks about once guests come into your kingdom. So she talks about an event as being a kingdom. It's an alternative universe or alternative, a kingdom. They want to be governed gently and respectfully and well. They kind of want to be told, like, what can we do? Like, guide us.
Yeah. So for instance, an example of being a chilled host, what could happen?
Oh, you could be at a party. Or I've been at a meeting where two people have completely taken over and talked over everyone, and have been so aggressive that no one felt they could say anything because they thought they were going to get shouted down.
Yeah. And then you completely lose the purpose of that meeting.
And it took one really brave person to say something very quietly that sucked the oxygen out the room and shut them up.
Yeah.
But, they weren't even the host. But the host was nowhere to be seen. The host, is that Bear? You sneezing?
Bear is sneezing.
The host was saying absolutely nothing, whereas she should have just said, can you stop now, please?
Yeah. And after reading this, actually, I had a staff meeting and everyone was presenting, and I told everyone that they could have 10 minutes. And it was with this in the back of my mind that I cut people off after 10 minutes, because I was like, we need to get through everyone. There was a lot of people to get through throughout the whole meeting. And I wanted to make sure it didn't run over so that everyone had their own time and it didn't encroach on everyone else's. So that's being a generous
host. There's a really lovely example in the book book, actually, she talks about the Alamo Draft House in Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
Where they have this system where so the CEO wants to, he says the purpose of the Alamo, it's all about purpose.
The Alamo is a cinema.
It's a cinema, sorry, yes, is to bring the magic of going to the movies in an age of streaming and Netflix back to the theatre. So by coming to his cinema, people agree to these rules. So
yes.
Everyone has a card where they write their drinks down if they want to order drinks or food. And the rule is, if you see someone texting or someone on their phone or someone, doing something that you don't want to do or making a noise or chatting, rather than having to, you have to enforce the rules. You just write on a piece of paper, you tick, this person's texting, can you please ask them to stop? And then someone will come over, a member of staff will come over and tell them off.
Yeah.
And you have 2 warnings.
Or ask them to leave.
And then you're thrown out.
Yeah.
And it's, why should the cinema, every cinema you go to, they tell you that you shouldn't use your phone.
Yeah, it's always at the beginning, isn't it?
But
Don't
then
use your
they
phone.
expect you to enforce the rule, whereas this is completely the opposite, and they are being a generous host by ensuring that that the rules are enforced and you don't have to do it.
Yeah,
I thought it was brilliant, great example.
Yeah, which makes total sense, really.
It does.
You don't want to give people free rein, because then those that are uber confident or for instance, know the host well or feel comfortable in that space will end up taking over. And just to give you all a bit of a background, we actually both work in events. We work within the events industry. So this was especially interesting for us.
You don't know what we do. Yeah, really interesting.
Yeah. And it actually, whenever she was going through any of the points, I could bring up an example of where it hasn't happened and where I've either been to or been involved in an event where they maybe didn't have a purpose, so therefore it didn't resonate with people, or they didn't have enough structure, or they had too much structure, or like food didn't come out until 9-10 o'clock at night, or there wasn't enough, and all of these kinds of things. So it's really interesting.
Yeah.
But it's not just for people in events.
Well,
Definitely.
which kind of leads on to defining why she calls it a gathering, because she very specifically calls it a gathering and not an event.
Yes.
So she says, this is Priya, she defines a gathering as any time 3 or more people come together with a purpose, with a beginning, a middle and an end.
Yeah.
Really clear.
And the main point, the main word in that sentence is purpose.
Yeah.
That's what my biggest takeaway from this is.
But as a facilitator, Priya says she's taught to strip everything away and focus on the interaction between people, whereas the everyday hosts concentrates on getting things right. So the stuff, the food, the flowers, the table linen, and the interaction between people is largely left to chance. And that, I have to say, most of the events I've ever been involved with have been all about making things look pretty. Yeah. Not necessarily thinking about what it is we actually want to do. What is the purpose of this event other than just showing off how amazing our food is? Yeah.
And I mean, as suppliers, sometimes when you're involved in an event, you're not brought into those discussions. So people who are organising the event may have had a discussion around why that event exists, but that might not necessarily filter down to everyone, and it should. Yeah. So like catering staff, waiters, waitresses, someone running the photo booth, all of those people should understand what the purpose of the event is, A, so that they can feel part of it, and B, so that they can add to it. It's like when you have an event and it's themed, you want that theme to filter down into every element of the event. So if you've then got like the photo booth operator who's just in in all blacks, in a black t-shirt, black trousers, it then just takes the guests away from being part of that overall theme. So it's really small things, but it has to filter through to everything that you do. Yeah. But like you say, all of those elements, the actual specific doing, should come secondary to the why.
Yeah. The other thing that we automatically go back to type when we talk about particular events. So she talks about off-the-rack events. Can you just explain a bit about that?
Yeah, so an off-the-rack event is, say, you're getting married in a church, you have a white dress and then the traditional march, and then you have the wedding reception. Or you have a board meeting and it's one big mahogany table with 12 or so white middle-aged men around it.
Maybe a woman if you're lucky.
maybe one, and she's probably going to be white as well.
Or a birthday party is a cake and candles.
Yeah. The example that she gave in her book, which I found really interesting, was the baby shower. I don't have any children, so it's not interesting for in that respect. It's more that the baby shower existed in the past historically, where the purpose of it was to introduce that woman and her new unborn baby into the wider community, to bring all the women in that community together so that they could give her advice
and money, because she would have been new to the workforce,
yes,
and wouldn't have enough money to be able to bring the baby up.
Exactly. And now parents are more balanced, so it's not just the woman that is bringing up the baby,
or same-sex marriages,
exactly. So what the example that she talked about was someone that was having her baby shower organised, and her husband mentioned that he would really like to be part of it.
It was Priya. They were organising a baby shower for Priya. Yeah, I read it in the book. So they were organising a baby shower for Priya, and Priya's husband said, well, can I come? And she said, no, this is for me. He ended up organising his own. He had an all-male baby shower. But sorry.
But it absolutely makes sense. I think there are a lot of parents now that purposefully decide to be equal parents so that it's not so one-sided. So then should you not be including men into that baby shower? Because they need to understand, they need to get that advice, they need to see what's being given to them, and they need to be a part of that kind of initiation.
There's a beautiful example of that on the Together Apart podcast. So she talks about exactly that. She talks about there was a baby shower, but it wasn't a pin a nappy on the baby type thing. I've never been to a baby shower, but apparently that's what happens. and so none of that, but it was very meaningful. It was split in two. So the first part was all the women, all her female friends. And she had a number of wise female friends who'd had babies or brought up kids, including her mum and her grandmother. And at one point, everyone, they made a necklace, and they gave a bead to go on the necklace. Oh. And everyone that gave a bead, as they gave the bead, they said something amazing about her personality that was going to get her through the labour, because she was particularly scared about the labour. Oh my God, it was amazing. I mean, I was crying out about that point. And then they all put together they shared a song that would help her in labour, and they all put together this mixtape, and then they gave her that. And then the men came in, and then older men came in and gave advice to the couple on how they brought up their kids. And then the husband and wife exchanged vows again on how they were going to bring up the baby together. I mean, I'm bawling my eyes out now. And then it's just so powerful. But that is a perfect example of not a standard baby shower.
And also people will remember it, and it will have some kind of meaning to it. So they'll come away from it thinking, oh my God, that was beautiful. It wasn't because when you get to a certain age, you end up going to lots of different weddings and lots of different baby showers and hen dos and all of that kind of stuff. And they're all very, very similar. So it's important that the people who are holding the event, that their personality and their beliefs and what they mean comes through in the event. Actually, a couple of friends of mine decided to, rather than, because they have a lot of joint friends, rather than have separate stag and hen do's, they had a joint one together, and they made it really big and fun, and they had men and women collectively all together, because that's what felt right to them. It didn't feel right to have two separate parties, because everything about them was collective, including their friends, which I thought was really beautiful.
That's really lovely, yeah.
Really lovely.
Oh my goodness. It set me off again.
So the podcast that we mentioned, actually, the one that...
Together Apart,
and then the podcast that Pete sent me, which was my introduction to Priya Parker, who's got the most amazing voice, just FYI for everyone.
Her TED Talk is insane. It's just amazing.
But that was actually recorded just after the pandemic hit. And what they were talking about was this shift from in-person gatherings to online, and how to make online gatherings still full of purpose, and how to hold them with purpose. And actually, I think everyone is probably feeling the effects now of Zoom fatigue.
We're all sick of them.
We are totally sick of them. I think when the pandemic first hit, everyone was obsessed with house party. We were all having
house party
quizzes.
It seems like years ago.
Everyone's getting dressed up. We're all getting into it.
Bingo.
Yeah. But actually now I think we're all a bit over it. now that we're having meetings left, right and centre, basically all day long. I mean, Kit Kat got it right in their advert, didn't they? Which was amazing, where it's got all of the Zoom meetings and then there's a Kit Kat in the middle saying take a break, because we live our lives on Zoom now. So it's gone completely the other way around. So even more so now, I think if you're going to have an event online, it's not good enough to just have the same event that you were going to do in person and move it online. You have to really utilise the virtual element of it.
And she gave this really lovely example. It's so beautiful. It was the first episode of her podcast, Together Apart. It was called "How is this night different from all other nights?" And it was about, oh my God, this woman was just amazing. Just this Jewish woman from New York with this amazing accent, old Jewish lady. She'd been hosting a Passover Seder, which is the ritual feast that marks the beginning of the Jewish holiday, Passover. And she'd been doing this Seder for 22 years. She'd been hosting this Seder, or longer. And it had always been done in her house, and she'd always had her family there, and there was always people there that she loved. And she couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And it was just such a beautiful example of how to flip, because one option was that they just cancel it, and that was one of the options, which she didn't want to do, and Priya kind of talked her out of that.
One of the things I loved about it was that she had invited people that she was close to and people that she loved, but they weren't necessarily Jewish. So when she opened up the gathering, to start off with, she highlighted that fact to everyone, and she said that she had invited them because she wanted to spend time with them and because she loved them, and it didn't matter if they weren't necessarily Jewish, because that wasn't necessarily the purpose of the gathering. It was to get all of her loved ones together. So it instantly put those people at ease and made them feel more connected.
Part of the community.
And part of the community, because they, obviously not being Jewish, they probably felt an element of being an outsider and
it's really lovely,
to be a part of it.
In 90 seconds, she kind of she gave this beautiful speech. It was just so amazing. So she welcomed everyone. She talked about her mother, and she gave a kind of a moment of vulnerability, and then she created context for the group and counterbalanced belonging, and it's just so beautiful, so beautiful. But one of the things that I loved was that traditionally it's the older generation would teach the younger generation something. So they tell the story of the Passover. That's the whole point. But Priya came up with this idea of turning the younger people into Zoom guides who would help the older generation get online and would be there to assist them if they got stuck. And it was just I won't do it justice by explaining it, because it's you
have to listen to
the episode. So
it's
good.
Brilliant. But I do think that with the online gatherings, you have to work even harder to impact on people, because they're not physically there. They don't have to stay there. They don't have to watch, and they don't have to listen, because they're online. So they're dipping in and out. So you have less time, because you're not going to be able to hold people's attention. It's like a conference. If you have an all-day conference, they're there. They can't leave. So although they might not be listening, they have to stay. Whereas with an online event, gathering, I keep saying event.
We do, because we're pre-programmed. If we go into meetings and start talking about gatherings, people think we're mental.
Yeah, they will.
But I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it anyway.
My biggest takeaways was the meeting element of it, and obviously organising events. I'm now more conscious of everything she's talking about, but even more so, especially because we can't hold events as much at the moment, is the meeting side of it, and really understanding why you do your meetings.
But she talks about making purpose your bouncer. So she says, let your purpose guide your approach to your guest list or to your event or to whatever you're doing, and to help your party thrive from generous exclusion over inclusion.
Generous exclusion.
Yes,
that's it.
Generous exclusion.
Yes. So tell me more.
So as a great example, I can't remember whether it's in her podcast or in the book, but she talks about how Andy Warhol says about Studio 54 that when asked about the door policy at Studio 54, he says it's a dictatorship on the door, so there's a democracy on the dance floor.
Yes,
and it's
nice.
like that really is literally about being a bouncer. Yeah. So it's making sure that whatever your purpose is, you don't let everyone in.
Yeah.
You just let the people that are going to make your gathering
purposeful.
purposeful.
One of the other examples that she talks about in the book is a student bar, I think in Berlin, where they did exactly that. So they created this student bar for students, obviously, but they were so strict about having to be a student to be able to come in. So the bar became so well known that there were famous people or politicians and people like that wanted to come, but they refused them entry because the purpose of that venue, of that gathering, was to just bring together students within the city, which I think is brilliant.
Amazing.
And we've probably all got examples of gatherings where we have opened it up to people and not necessarily thought about the impact that would have on them. Another example she talks about is a collection of, I think, 5 or 6 guys that met regularly to kind of exercise together. So once a week.
This is a great example.
Yeah, they'd get together with their trainer. And one week, one of the participants mentioned that he was going to be on holiday. So he suggested that rather than lose his money, he wanted to let someone else come in. And they all sort of had this weird feeling about it, but didn't quite know what it was. And then they realised that actually, yes, it was a session with a trainer. They were exercising. But actually,
their real purpose, what was their real purpose? It was their purpose.
Exactly. The real purpose of it was to an opportunity for them to get together, because they're busy people, they don't see each other very often, and to talk about stuff together. And actually bringing in an outsider would have affected that dynamic. So they were quite strong on it, and they said, oh, no, you can't come in, because it would have impacted on the dynamic of the gathering and it would have changed the purpose of it. Which I found really interesting.
That's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah. And even so I have found this, but again, like I said, it's not until someone states it to you that you actually realise that it's a thing. So she talks about actually creating a boundary. So when you're at a table, for instance, and you've got 5 people, so you've got 2 people opposite each other and then 1 person on the end, you've then got a gap at the end. And she talks about, it sounds very like spiritually, but it actually really makes sense. And I'm sure we've all experienced it. When you're sat at that table, the conversation flows out because it's not enclosed. And like if you're having a picnic, just the act of having a picnic blanket gives you a boundary for your conversation, so that the conversation doesn't flow out. Yeah, which I found really lovely.
That's amazing. Yeah, she's a wise lady, Priya Parker.
Is such a wise lady.
Such a wise lady.
So, what else did you love about it?
Oh, there's so many little bits. There's so many. I've got so many. If you could see what I'm looking at, I'm looking at 5-6 pieces of paper. Double-sided. So you're horrified because we're not supposed to be writing notes.
No, I love it, because when I got here, Pete gave me a handful of notes. I was like, this is great. Thanks very much.
Except I'm so keen not to. So basically, the reason why we didn't record last week is because I wanted to do the book justice, and I didn't feel like we could. And now I feel like I'm over-prepared and I'm going to miss things. So I think my biggest thing from the whole of this podcast is please go and read the book and listen to all her podcasts, and you'll find everything on our Google Doc, won't you?
Yes.
But there are loads of lovely things. So and things I didn't know about. So she talks about how, I mean, just going back to being a chill host, she talks about how Obama, he noticed when he asked questions in his, wherever he was doing whatever he was doing, whether it was a school or a college or it was something in the White House, he noticed that when he asked questions, it tended to be the men that put their hands up. Yeah. So he had this policy of boy-girl.
Yeah, which I think is brilliant.
And if a woman didn't put their hand up, he would wait until one did.
Yes.
So
that's standing, like, you have to be, like, you can't just be a generous host. You have to stand by it. So she talks a lot about having set rules and the fact that rules are actually a good thing for people. It's not that you're being, obviously there's going overboard and having too many rules and then you ruin it for everyone involved. But if you have a specific set of rules, and actually just coming back to one of the examples that Peter talked about, which was, it's on her podcast, which is Brennan's birthday, which is so beautiful. But tell me about it, because his sister organised his birthday party for him, and she gave a very specific set of rules.
But it was all set up in the invitation. So the invitation is so Priya talks about, just before we go on to this, Priya talks about how 90% of your event the work on a good event, a good gathering, happens before the actual gathering, and that could be she talks about the invisible structure, which we'll come on to in a second, but also in how you set the event up, how you orientate people.
Yeah.
So how you orient people rather. So you with Brennan, I'll just explain the Brennan story. So Brennan is Shauna is his aunt, and they live in New England, and Brennan is 12, and he's got Downs.
This is during the pandemic.
It's during the pandemic. Yeah. Sorry, he's during the pandemic, and he's his 12. It's his birthday. He's going to be 12, and she wants to throw him a party. And she was struggling to come up with a concept that he would love and still keep people safe. So Priya sort of talked about what they might do, and they ended up creating this party where he would be like the prom king. I mean, she talks about it in a different way. I can't remember what she says now, but in New England, on the 4th of July, it'd be like the 4th of July, like
on the parade.
Yeah,
that'd
be like the head of the parade. Yeah, and that's a big thing in a small New England town. So he was basically being that. So she invited all her friends. She's very specific with her invitation. So she said she gave it a very, very clear time. So it starts at 3:00, and she said if you don't feel safe, you completely understand. It's the way she ended it was really clever.
Oh, so just to add to this,
sorry,
what she's asking them to do is drive in and meet at this park.
Yeah, I'm not explaining this very well at all. So that's right. She's inviting people to bring their car, to park in this car park, and then Brennan will drive around and he will wave at everyone. And they're going to play his favourite pop music, and they're going to sing Happy Birthday and make lots of noise. Yeah. And the way that she invited them, she was very clear about the time. So you come at 3:00, and she ended it with, and Priya said, this is so clever. I completely understand. We want you to be safe. We want you to feel safe. We completely understand if you can't be there. But just remember, Brennan loved crowds.
Yeah.
And it was like, you better be.
Oh my God. Yeah. It was just, I'm getting like tingles now just remembering it, because they, on the podcast, they actually play some of the.
So you can hear him shouting.
Yeah, you can hear it all happening. And you can just imagine for him, everyone turning up, everyone beeping their horns,
and then
everyone making loads
police cars coming in formation. That's when I started crying.
Yeah. And then they join in and they make loads of noise, and you just think for the during the pandemic, it was so stressful for everyone, but especially young people. I think it's just such a confusing time. They don't necessarily understand what's happening, and to still be able to celebrate their birthday in such a beautiful way where he can get all of that loving energy thrown at him through everyone beeping their horns and making loads of noise is just...
It's beautiful, isn't it?
Really beautiful.
Yeah.
Really, really lovely. So just now you mentioned the invisible structure. So tell me, what is that? It's...
so she gives this example of a conference might take 2 or 3 days, but to put on an amazing conference, it will take 10 or 11 months to build the invisible structure that keeps people protected, that keeps people connected to each other, that keeps people connected to the purpose, and gets people, I love this, gets people marching to the same tune so that they can dance to their own beat.
Yeah, nice.
She's so wise. I love it. I love that. But it's so true, isn't it?
She knows what she's talking about, Priya, doesn't she?
She really does.
She really does. And conferences are a big one, aren't they? They are, I mean, we've probably all been to one that saps the energy out of you. And it's so important to understand why you're there and what you're doing and have a purpose for it.
Yeah. She talks about how, when you've been to a bad event, when you just leave feeling like that was a waste of my life, or I'll never get that back.
Deflating, isn't it?
But sometimes you go to something and it's completely incredible.
Yeah.
And I suppose it's understanding what's the difference. How can you make people leave feeling that they, feeling nourished and feeling changed?
Yeah. So talking about meaningful gatherings, but also with the element of virtual and having to move online, Pete, you created a beautiful Christmas gathering, didn't you, with your family?
I gatheringified my Christmas gathering, my Christmas gatherings. So this
was before you started reading the book.
No, I'd actually listened to all the podcasts at this point.
Okay,
so,
there we go.
So I think a lot of it was Priya Parker. So Yeah, so I still haven't seen my parents in real life since last May.
Oh my God.
And because we wanted to do something at Christmas, and we were going to try and get together, and then we went into, I don't know what it was. How many lockdowns we've been in now?
Yeah. I think it was 2.0.
Was it?
Yeah.
Anyway, it was another lockdown. So that was all off. And then rather than cancel it, I put together this program of different online things.
I mean, when you told me, it just instantly made me feel bad about everything I'd done for my family for Christmas.
No, I'm just a bit over the top. But I mean, I felt like Priya would be proud.
I think she would. When you explained it to me, I was like, oh my God, it was the 12 days of Christmas, wasn't it?
It was the 12 days of Christmas. There were 12. I don't think we quite came up with 12 different 12 different things to do. But I mean, we just did some really interesting stuff. So we did, I'd always wanted to make eggnog, which is something we don't ever talk about.
No, it's a very American thing, isn't
it? But apparently not. It's very English. The Americans nicked it. We used to call it,
How dare they?
We used to call it posset, and then the Americans nicked it.
I mean, eggnog's a much better word than posset. That just sounds gross.
But eggnog makes people feel a bit sick. It's just.
I mean, I'm vegan, so I don't want
it. No. But we made eggnog, and it was hilarious because I did it with my aunt and uncle and my mum and dad, and I have it on video, and my auntie's getting pickled. It's very funny. So we made eggnog, and then we went off and watched a carol concert, and then we came back and drank more eggnog, and it was lovely. And
ultimately, the purpose of your gathering was to bring your family together, wasn't it?
Yeah. So that was just one. I mean, we did loads. You know, I decided I was going to run down Oxford Street and Regent Street and New Bond Street with my camera.
Pete's a big runner, just so everyone knows.
And show them the Christmas lights. So I did that. I'm not entirely sure what they could see, but
which is beautiful.
I had hilarious fun.
And I bet they really appreciated.
I think they appreciated the effort, if nothing else.
Yeah. I mean, that is a lot of effort.
But now reading the book, I think I'd have done it differently. Don't ask me what I'd have done differently, but I think I would have. I think I would have done it with a little bit more purpose, and I would have. I don't know.
I think the ultimate purpose and the ultimate love for you was there, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Bringing your family together, not being able to see everyone, but still wanting to make it really special.
There are better
I'm putting words into your mouth now.
There are better examples in Priya's book.
I love it.
But it was, thank you. But it was, it was lots of fun. And I felt, ultimately, we all felt very connected. In fact, I felt more connected over Christmas, over the leading up to Christmas with all my family and all my friends. And we did a whole load. I mean, there's a whole load of other stuff that we did. We all went to, I invited all my friends to come and see A Christmas Carol at the old Vic, which is done online. So I bought everyone tickets, and we all met up and had drinks, and it was so beautiful, so beautiful. And I won't be able to do that again. So I had a friend in Ireland who joined, and I won't be able to do that again.
I think that is one of the positives to come out of the pandemic, and in terms of getting people together, is that you are able to bring people in that wouldn't necessarily normally be able to come. So for instance, if you are holding like a virtual or a hybrid gathering, you can have people not just from all over the world, but people from different circumstances. So if someone, for instance, doesn't like to travel too much, or they've got young children, or they're a bit introvert and they don't like the whole feeling of being part of a big event or a big gathering, especially when it's like networking and things like that.
Priya talks about this.
Yeah, it's making it a bit more inclusive.
She talks about this on her Instagram. There's a really interesting Instagram post that she put up at the beginning of the pandemic about how people who are disabled who have been asking to have virtual meetings, virtual events for years.
Yeah.
And the post, it's a cartoon. The post goes, "Can we have the virtual event?" And the reply is, "No, we can't." And then the pandemic hits, and then everyone's having a virtual event. and it's it's not funny really at all, is it? Because it's true. But I think virtual events have democratized gatherings. Gatherings have democratized gatherings. It means that everyone can go.
Yeah.
So that, if you're a one parent family and you can't go to an event because you can't get a babysitter, you can't afford a babysitter, or you don't want to drink, or like you said, like social, got some
social
anxiety, or whatever, or you just,
or if you like
live too far away.
Yeah, with networking events, I always find that I wouldn't necessarily go on my own. And then when you are there, you mingle with people that you already know. So whereas with networking events online now, you are all on an equal footing, aren't you?
Yeah.
So you had a networking event recently that you went to.
Absolutely hilarious. Yeah, I ran it with my friend Jamil, actually. Yeah, it's a program that he discovered called Run the World, which is hilarious because every time I try and Google it to find it, I end up with Beyonce.
Yeah.
But
who run the world?
Who run the world? Brilliant. Beyonce. So yeah, the way it works is that you set how many rounds you want to go.
Yeah.
So there's two people talking, how many rounds you want to go and how long you want to talk. And then you press go, and then it apparently is an algorithm. I don't believe that 1 second. But anyway, it finds the person that you're going to talk to, and then using this clever algorithm, and then literally we set it as a minute each. So you had a minute to tell that person your story, whatever you wanted that to be. So a minute each, and there'll be a countdown on the top right hand of the screen. And then after 2 minutes, you literally get chucked out and they find someone else.
So intense.
So it's really intense.
But great.
But people got off it. People came off the call and into the like, I'm going to call it a Zoom room, into like the room where everyone's together, and they were exhilarated by what they'd just been through. It was amazing. But yeah, I'm
joining the next one, so I'm very excited.
So exciting, yeah. It's really, really good.
But I do think that that's one of the positives, like I said, to come out of this and to utilise the virtual element of it. And we were talking earlier about meetings and having those in person. And there are so many times when you're rushing around throughout your day, or you've got a pitch that's in another part of the country, and you spend so much time travelling. And so time, money, and also the impact of traveling on the environment and things like that. There's such a big impact of constantly traveling around. And now you can just jump on we keep saying Zoom, but maybe we should say Teams for a bit, balance out the...
I don't like Teams. I'm sorry, Microsoft.
No, me neither.
But it was interesting. You were talking about having to go to a different part of the country.
Edinburgh. Yeah, and we're in London. So we were pitching for a job up in Edinburgh, and we were going to be travelling up, and there was four of us on the pitch. Out
of the office all day, and then the pandemic hit, and then they all went online.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping after all this is over, that sort of thing doesn't happen again.
Yeah, I hope so. I think that there's definitely a place for virtual meetings, but one of the things I have definitely done more since reading the book is really questioning all of my meetings, like why. So our sales meeting, why are we having that? Our team meeting, what's the purpose of that? And just really honing in on why I'm getting everyone together, or why we're all getting together. Why are we asking these questions? What's the format of it? And what are we getting out of it? And I think that's definitely my biggest takeaway from this book, really.
Yeah. One of mine is not to gather on autopilot.
Yes.
Just always do the same thing. And then it's just, life's too short. If this pandemic's taught me anything, it's just life really is too short. I'm going to meet with you in person if I really, really need to.
You just don't want to leave the house, do you?
I'm quite happy to leave the house. I just don't want to be, just having needless meetings, like flying around London.
Yep.
Where we're based, meeting up with people. And it's just ridiculous and exhausting where if I need to meet with you, like we're doing now, we have to do this in person. We could have done this on Zoom, but we felt we needed to meet in person today.
Yeah, I like to see your face in real life.
I like to see yours. But there are lots of meetings where you don't need to do that.
No, agreed. Yeah, no, definitely. So then, Peter.
Yes, Evie.
How does this book make you better?
I thought about this quite a lot.
Yes.
So I think it makes me better because I'm excited by the psychology of gatherings.
Yeah.
And how they transform people.
Yeah. Brilliant.
And you?
It's just asking why. I think so often you have, like we were saying, you have gatherings and you don't necessarily delve into the why you're there. You think more about how and when and things like that.
Purpose.
So it is purpose.
Yeah.
That's the main thing. And just reading it just instantly makes you think about it. So then every time you're having any kind of gathering, you are questioning your own reasoning behind it, which I think will make everyone's gatherings more purposeful, and that will make us all better.
I love it. Can I end with this quote?
Yes, you can.
This is my favourite Priya Parker quote. I might get this tattooed on my arm. Actually, I won't. It's too long. It will hurt too much. And
it's a whole sentence.
My mum will be horrified. Gatherings crackle and flourish when real thought goes into them, when structure is baked into them, and when a host has the curiosity, willingness, and generosity of spirit to try.
I mean, Priya Parker is amazing, isn't she?
She's amazing.
Yeah. We urge you all to go out and read The Art of Gathering and listen to all of the podcasts. It will get you hooked. So enjoy it.
Yeah, brilliant.
And thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks,
And
Evie.
we'll see you next time. Thank you for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.